Um, so that's what I liked about the medicinal plants, because if you go to the shrink, it will probably focus more and zooming in more on your issue, probably making you understand from different perspective about your issue more and more. But again, your focus will be there. And how do you heal that? Where with and that's what I actually expected, because that was my intention. Okay, show me mushrooms, being a good, shrink to me. But what mushrooms actually did, there was like, they just put the light in the darkness. So by default, when there is light, darkness cannot exist. So they just show me that you and another cells is empty space. So what's your question again? So that was very funny. I kept laughing a lot. I was like, okay. I even tried at some point to think about my mother, because obviously I had issue with my mother. But then I look at it and there's empty space. So the mushrooms were again like, what was your question again? My name is Emma. 2 days ago I was administered 2 grams of mushrooms, medicine plant. I had a very painful week before, where all my issues were intensified and exaggerated to the point that I was going in a very strange place. And mushrooms showed me that you and another person, or any other self, or any other constructed object that you perceive, whether it's your thought or a plan or goal, something you need to achieve, it's all empty space. And the focus actually has to be on the space in between this empty space. So all of this really reminded me of some sort of negatives. When you take the picture and before you project them, you can see that light is dark and dark is light, white is black and black and white. That gives a very good picture of how I perceive the world on my trip. That the things we were taught important are actually unimportant, and the things that we taught to ignore actually is where our focus needs to be. So for example, if you understand that you are empty space and another person is empty space, and it's all about the field between you and another person, and what you want to focus on this field is how you grow your garden of love by making sure that the light of the sun is coming down and let the plants grow. All you need to care about is that field. When you communicate, when you think about another person, you don't focus on them. You focus on how open you stay towards that empty space. So that would allow, an open analogy is an open roof that allows sunlight to go down to the garden. If you could imagine, when you think about another person, it would probably project your fears, your anxiety, and maybe judgment, and that would create some kind of closed energy, and that would affect that garden. The ceiling will be closed, so the sunlight is not going to come through. Your garden is going to die. When I was asking what is love, I was showing that love is not the concept that we need to create. Love is actually, it's all it is, and love is in listening. So it's about how to stop not loving. It's about how to stop your thoughts, how to stop you from talking energetically as well, and instead listen. Listen to the moment, listen to the space in between. And I was keep laughing through the entire trip, because it was all about what is love. Oh, okay, yes, of course. Love is just actually be. Love is listen, and love is listening to the to how the plant is growing, listening to the energy of the sun, listening to the air, listening to the space, because space is is what is important, and space is what contains love. Space is a fluid energy which you can go infinitely in, and you can discover infinite amount of love. Where the objects and our thoughts even is you perceive it more like a fixed energy, where everything is basically dead. I mean, you can't really go in too much into your concrete structure of what you think things are. So it's not even that interesting to look into objects, into fixed things. And in our world, we get more and more caught into zooming into the objects. And it's a little bit like, when in the past there were so many beautiful houses, but if you could imagine those 3 houses on the mountain, how much space we had between the houses. And the same way it's with our thoughts. Now, when you live, especially in the city, Hong Kong, Singapore, there is so little space between the houses that unless you actually plant a tree, nothing would grow. So this is what happening on an energetic level with us. That's why we get so much more and more depressed, because we're not looking into the right thing. Again, the negative. You see, if you feel negative, that means maybe you're stuck in a negative world. Maybe actually what you think is right is wrong, and vice versa. So keep focusing on the space and listening, because listening is love, on that silent, still space in between, between your thoughts. It starts right from there. So that's all. Like I said, so many issues. One of the issues I asked, what was the root of my separation anxiety, and it showed me right away that it was there as soon as I was separated from my mother's womb. So I was like, okay, so it's inevitable. Abandonment issues, again, it's inevitable when you were left for the first time as a child, even if you had loving parents. But it only becomes issue and affects you so much when you keep zooming into that. When instead, if you realize that you and another self is empty space, then the issue of separation cannot even exist between two empty spaces. Because what is important, where you focus in, is the space in between. So if your empty space here or your empty space there, and it's all about the space in between, it doesn't really matter. The space will be always there, and it was still there. The garden of love is still there. So that's what I liked about the medicinal plants, because if you go to the shrink, it will probably focus more and zooming in more on your issue, probably making you understand from different perspective about your issue more and more. But again, your focus will be there. And how do you heal that? Where with and that's what I actually expected, because that was my intention. Okay, show me mushrooms being a good, shrink to me. But what mushrooms actually did, there was like, they just put the light in the darkness. So by default, when there is light, darkness cannot exist. So they just show me that you and another self is empty space. So what's your question again? So that was very funny. I kept laughing a lot. I was like, okay. I even tried at some point to think about my mother, because obviously I had issue with my mother. But then I look at it and there's empty space. So the mushrooms were again like, what was your question again? I think it's all about really now retraining for me, because now it's been 2 days, the feeling is gone, but it's practice, and many things are still habitual, many things pulls me towards thinking that people are important, my thoughts are important, and I keep missing that space in between. And towards the end of the day, that space actually shrinks more and more. So just listening between my breath, listening to the empty space, and finding love there rather than focusing on objects and people and thoughts is basically the best medicine that you can do. Another thing is that, just be aware that when you're trapped in those negative thoughts, it might be a potential food for some, negative beings that might feed from that. And unfortunately, I had that experience. And in the first part of my trip, because I was so caught in my issues, a demon who was feeding from that, of course, attached to me, and I had those very bizarre markings on my back, which will probably stay for some time, which are not bruises or burns. And I know something was attached, so in the first part of my trip, I was praying a lot out loud, and I was casting out that demon. And unless I let him really, really know very clear that this is a house of love and light, and there is nothing of sadness and anxiety that you can feed from, he wouldn't go. But when I made it very clear, and I said I will repeat it till the end of my day, then I could actually see him, how he's just, oh, okay. He lost interest because there was nothing to take from me. So this is also very important, to protect yourself and to live right, to focus on the right things, because otherwise it might attract some psych attacks for yourself, where actually you just get so absorbed and just staying in the trance kind of state where you can only kind of like hear yourself saying help, help, in the depth of that despair. So when you feel you caught there, then you definitely need to cast out some demons. So yeah, I guess the main words of the trip would be protect yourself, focus on the right things, which is empty space between objects. Objects are actually empty space, and what you consider empty space is actually the important field for energy to create love and to give yourself love. And to love is actually to listen. And that heals you, because that erases so many issues with anxiety disorder that you might have, because you can only have anxiety about objects, whether in your thoughts in the future, anxiety about the future, whether about people, or your achievements. When you realize it's all empty space, how can you be anxious about empty space?